Okay, let's see this. This I'm interested.
What games you can buy. The answer sadly is not Steam, it's not developers, and it's not even governments, because this week actually proved that it's Mastercard. They can fine platforms $200,000 for selling games with, quote, no artistic value. Because apparently Mastercard are the judges of artistic value. But here's what Mastercard did not expect. They did not expect thousands of gamers flooding their call centers, and that actually working. And with that happening, the payment processors are beginning to crack. We've even got Valve making big statements. The payment processors even finally admitted a little bit of a truth that lies beneath all of this. It's a humongous story, and so it's actually understandable. We've got to begin with Collective Shout. Collective Shout decided to set the record straight. Obviously, they really did kick quite the hornet's nest. So, they say that they're fighting false claims and misinformation, and here's their story, at least as they present it. They say they only reached out to payment processors after Steam ignored them since April, and their post stresses something that they say is very important. The Collective Shout never asked Itch to remove all adult content, just content that involved sexualized violence and torture of women. Now that is content that's actually illegal in some territories. Now what they said here is partially true, but there's a little bit of a problem. Their original call to action explicitly framed these platforms as facilitating child abuse game sales. That's the thing. They didn't just say specific games, they said platform. They targeted the platforms. And that's the sort of content that would be globally illegal, and therefore very good reason for payment processors to act swiftly. So, what's really happening here? How do we actually break this down? Essentially, right, Collective Shout wants to take credit for their win, but they also want to deflect blame for how it actually played out in the real world. They basically say that they wanted specific games to be removed, but they never back that up by actually mentioning what those games are.
Today's video is sponsored by RainGG. Rain is one of the fastest growing CS2 case opening sites. Besides fun case openings, they offer game modes like case battles, upgrader, and doubles. Rain gives players free daily, weekly, and monthly cases. If you sign up with my code LOBA, you get 3 free cases and 5 deposit bonus. The site supports instant deposit and withdrawals using skins or crypto. If you want to try Rain, click the first link in the pinned comment and use code LOBA to claim your rewards. Please remember, loot boxes sites can be addictive, so make sure you're over 18 and only spend money you can afford to lose. Good luck.
And then they imply that they couldn't predict how Steam and Itch would react to what they did, that masses of games would end up being purged. But here's the thing, Collective Shout, don't patronize us. You've used payment processors before. We know
Mastercard and Visa cut ties with...
you know how this works, but at least for now, they're simply deflecting blame. They're arguing that Itch didn't have to purge everything. But here's the problem. Realistically, they're wrong. Itch pretty much had no choice. It's a sensitive topic, but Itch has talked just about as much as they're able to. With single-digit staff, they're essentially juggling angry developers, rightly angry developers, and a bunch of technical problems on the platform. Certainly doesn't look fun, and we've got this July 28th FAQ that explained their lack of options. Essentially, right, because Itch is an open platform, they couldn't just remove specific games like Steam does. That's because they simply don't know about every game. Because it's an open platform. They have a single-digit staff count. So in an ideal world, creators would just be honest about everything, and that would solve the issue. But we all know that that does not work at scale. So they essentially felt that mass de-indexing basically had to happen. At least that's their point of view. But Itch does say that those games, they've been de-indexed. They're not gone. So here's what they maintain. The de-indexed or delisted content should still be available to users. That's of course as long as creators haven't went and removed the pages themselves. Now there's been confusion here, and that's down to some games. Consume Me, Last Call, and Mouthwashing were flagged by players and press. But what's odd is those games were already de-indexed before any of this stuff started. Itch's position is basically that if you lost access to a game completely, then something is wrong and you should contact them, because it ain't supposed to be like that. But then there's the payment processor problem, and that follows a similar logic. People basically pointed out their policy of withholding payments from banned accounts. Itch responded to that, saying, "We have no interest in withholding anyone's earnings." Basically, that policy existed before this crisis, and it exists to stop grifters from breaking their rules and profiting. It's just that in light of everything that's happened over the last fortnight, it's, not exactly ideal. But at least for now, they're trying to look forward. So here's basically what they've updated us with. They've tried talking to payment processors, and they've gotten a list of problematic topics. And all of those topics are now banned on their store. That is, of course, even though
this shouldn't even be allowed ever.
Not all those topics are illegal, and you'll need to remember that distinction because we'll come back to it later.
What happened with Steam though? Steam tosses a game. Wait.
Valve usually say very little until they're absolutely forced, but obviously it's been a spicy few weeks and they've taken quite a lot of actions. And that means we've got a perfect case study. Meet Vile Exhumed. Lovely name for a lovely game. It's from a solo dev and boutique horror publisher called Dread XP. And this game was close enough to release to actually have reviews in the press, but it's now not going to launch on Steam. The store page? Gone. The 3,000 plus wish lists? Deleted. And that blows because that is a real asset for a game developer. And honestly, if you're not in Steam, you're really going to struggle in sales. Now, all this happened after bouncing around the approval process for a month, and the denial reason was this, quote, sexual content with depictions of real people. But here's what's important, right? And it's weird. Vile Exhumed is a horror game that's not meant to be exploitative. It's basically one of those fake desktop indie games. The whole thing is you unpack a mystery through FMVs and text logs. It explores misogyny and parasocial relationships via implied adult content. Now, the point is the player should feel uncomfortable. That's entirely the point. And it should have sailed through approval when you look at its content, especially with an established publishing partner. But this week it didn't. And without a statement from Valve, we really couldn't know what's happening internally. The good news is we do have a statement from Valve. To hit Valve's response, I first got to tell you what they've responded to. So, Mastercard put out a public statement on, quote, recent headlines on gaming content. Hello. Anyway, they explicitly deny asking any platform.
Has not evaluated any game requires of any game sites and platforms to media reports allegation. Private network follows standards based on the rule of law. Put simply, we allow all lawful purchases on our network. At the same time, we require merchants to have appropriate controls to ensure Mastercard cannot be used for unlawful purchases, including illegal adult content.
Platform to restrict sales. And they say that they haven't actually evaluated a individual game. Their claim is they allow all legal products to be sold. They only ban illegal purchases. Visa actually told customers the same thing, which would certainly make the last few weeks really confusing, wouldn't it? Because lots of perfectly legal content has been delisted from these stores. And, well, that is why Valve kind of just went and shot Mastercard and Visa down almost immediately. So, Valve released a rare statement to Kotaku, and here's what they revealed. Mastercard refused to talk to them directly. So that...
Mastercard denies pressuring Steam to censor. Mastercard did not communicate with Valve directly despite a request to do so. Valve's statement sent over email to Kotaku.
Instead, what happened is Mastercard talked to their network of payment processors and banks, and then those middlemen then went and talked to Valve. And they basically refused to accept Valve's own content policy. They said that Valve must follow Mastercard's rule 5.12.7, which is thrilling. What's that rule? Well, that rule does ban illegal content, sure, but it also says any content that, quote, reflects negatively on Mastercard can be banned. Or, this is the real banger, content that, quote, lacks serious artistic value.
What the
I'm really glad that they are the people who now, yes, judge what serious and unserious artistic value is. Cool. Awesome that payment processors are now the judges of art. Fantastic. And if you breach that rule, Mastercard can revoke your ability to process transactions and impose a 200 grand fine. And that's where this all falls apart. It's also why Rule 15 exists on Steam. That was the rule, if you remember, basically said any content that may break payment processor rules, that Valve basically can kick that off Steam. Because, well, turns out this, what we just talked about, explains why Valve said may break. Really blows. Now, the content that's been removed, well, unless you're in specific territories looking at specific games, it's legal. And this is where Stripe then come in. Stripe confirmed this in their response to Itch. They said they can't process anything related to gratification. And the reason why? Well, according to Stripe, it's restrictions placed on them by their banking partners. Not by the law, by banking partners, because ultimately it's about risk management. It's PR risk of being targeted by groups like Collective Shout, so hello again to you guys. But there's also a higher risk of chargebacks on adult products, and this would be one of the unit economic problems that we'd be dealing with here. And as GameIndustry.biz highlighted, basically they're losing money on refunds from embarrassed customers. But I think what's kind of key is that over these last few weeks, the real challenge to this whole system has actually been you. Turns out rebellions can kind of work, so the internet exploded with stories, YouTube did, it was quite a time. People were reaching out to Visa and Mastercard, just inundating their call centers. Yeah, so you're working in a call center, maybe you're a robot, who knows, but just legions of gamers over the horizon, flooding your phone lines. Now, this then meant that scripts circulated because, as you know, call centers all rely on scripts. And because people got scripts, well, we're gamers. We made guides. So you would basically end up with people having guides on how to reach various departments. And this would cover things like the right keywords to say. And the overall approach was
talking points to hit. Steam and itch.io forward present the list very games.
never be aggressive.
After a small right-wing group that doesn't present the wide revelation made a few phone calls.
Feign ignorance to waste their time, and some people even found a few allies.
Called Visa today. The phone operator was a self-described gamer. When I said I had a complaint about policy, he immediately knew what it was about. Told me the call was recorded, said that there was an extremely large volume of calls about the issue, and he hoped that it would make a difference.
Is working in these call centers. And what really pushed this is that many of the plans and many of the guides for dealing with these companies, well, those came from artists and creatives. And the reason why is those people have already been forced from sites like Gumroad. So basically, they've seen this whole playbook before. But this time what's a bit different is we're actually seeing a real impact. As an example, Aftermath tracked the pattern over time, and as more and more call center resources got eaten up, the responses from these companies changed. And per their source, they went from, quote, respectful to defensive with each passing day. Others reported something that's also interesting, that across multiple calls, they got different scapegoats.
Visa call center is now telling me that it isn't Visa, but banks that are pressuring Steam itch to remove all content. Not sure how true that is or how to direct the convo from there.
As for who is actually to blame here. So the pressure just kept on building. These companies then felt forced to address mainstream headlines because it turned out that their whole policies designed around avoiding bad PR led to them getting bad PR. Because whenever someone like me can sit down on the internet and say, hey everyone, Mastercard now get to decide what is or is not artistically valid, that's obviously pretty bad for them. Now, what all of this pressure did is kind of reveal the truth here. That this is not happening because of laws. It's happening because of these companies' policies. Now, these are private companies, and they are deciding how stores work. They're deciding how...
Bro, crazy bro. What the hell, man?